Thank you, Mr. Mohan. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty One territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. This afternoon, my name is Robert Hutchings. Mr. Robert Hutchings, I will be chairing the hearing today. I'm joined on the panel by Ms. Tracy Anderson and Mr. Ron Merritt. The assessor representing the Assessments and Taxation Department is Mr. Nuwan Thudagala Munasinga. And our administrative personnel today is Zachary Mohan. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment role in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with this board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following their swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony, followed by questioning again. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions based on the evidence presented here today. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Excuse me. We will be hearing items 1 through 8 on the docket today. Mr. Mohan, please affirm the assessor and applicant's testimony.
Of course, Mr. Chair. Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Nuwan Thudagala Munasinga.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Ms. Applicant, please stand. Please state your full name.
Farah Cates.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohan. Welcome to the applicant and the assessor today. First item on the docket is item number 1, file number 24-2281, roll number 130818751000. Address is 444 Logan Avenue, and we're dealing with a 2025 realty assessment appeal. Mr. Nuwan, when you are ready, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 242281, roll number 130818751000, 444 Logan Avenue. Roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023. Assessed value 509,000. Classification class code 10, residential. Liability taxable. Number of buildings, there are 2 buildings on the site, and actual build year 1894 and 1990, effective year build 1950 and 1990. next page, that means in page 2, you can see the request for income information. And on page 3, you can see the location of the property and aerial picture. And page 4, there's no sales history for the subject property. And page 5, you can see income valuation summary. This apartment or row house, this is a row house. So this have 3 1-bedroom and 4 4-bedrooms, altogether 5 units. And gross potential rent 65,818. Vacancy rate 5.3%. Effective gross income comes at 62,330. We have used expense ratio 59.19. And oh, sorry. The net operating comes at 25,437. Using 5-point cap rate, the estimated market value comes at 509. 509,000. So market value per suite 101,800. So in page 6, you can see a rent comparable. I have to mention here, it's kind of hard to find a comparable for row housing. So I use fairly new some comparables. So comparable 2 and 4. But I want to show you the average rent for the area. Anyway, we have like effective gross income, same as applicant. So page 7, we have CMHC rent calculation, and in here you can see like percentage of the market rent. It's 80% comparing to the more CMHC rent and model rent. Basically, they are getting like 20% discount because we are considering this is like non-profit organization, and this is because of that we use like lower rent. And page 8, you can see the capitalization rate. So page 9, we have capitalization rate evidence. This following is sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose of showing this individual capitalization rate is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model derived capitalization rate. They are not meant to be comparables specific to the subject property. And I have to mention here the first the 7 sales 727 Sargent Avenue. Actually we have like did some mistake when we are calculating. So that could be 3.45. It's not could be, that should be 3.45, the first one. And I have to mention about the Woodlawn, 203 Woodlawn Avenue. Actually we figure it out that one not in arm's length sale. Please ignore that sales when you are considering that information. And page 10, Municipal Assessment Act expert. And page 11, you can see the Google view of the property, Google Street View. And page 12 and 13, you can see the income and expense information up to page 15. So that's my end of my presentation. I believe this is fair value for this property. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Cates, good afternoon. Any questions of the evidence presented by the assessor?
Yes, I have some questions.
Thank you.
Can I begin? Okay. So on page 1 with the effective age, would it be fair to say that the effective age is determined by a subjective adjustment from the department rather than being the result of inputs into a formula per se?
I actually hard to answer that question, but anyway, like when the normal way is if the property have done the renovation, so if normally what we do, we add effective age to reflect that renovation. So that's how we like figure it out, the effective age. So I believe that's how this effective age came to this building.
Okay, so on page 5 with your income value summary, would that be based on the effective age or the actual age?
I believe like it should be on effective age.
Okay. So if you turn to page 6 with your rent comps, comp 1 at Renfrew and comp 3 at Wickham are in superior locations to the subject property. Would that be correct?
Yes, but I think we have the same effective gross income, right? So yes, I believe. Yes, right.
Yes, no, I appreciate that rent's not an issue, but I just wanted to point that out. So if you turn to page 8 with your cap rate table, so in looking at the cap rate range, can you provide any information on the sales that are used to achieve that range, such as the number of sales or location of the properties, for example?
Yeah, I have rebuttal for this one. So yeah, in rebuttal we have the calculation.
I'm on
about
page 8. On page 8, just of your table, not on the specific sales.
Sorry, page. Could you please repeat that question, please?
For sure. So on page 8, where you have the cap rate ranges, the 20th, 80th percentile, do you have any information on the sales that are being used to achieve that range, such as how many sales the model's using, what locations they're in?
No, I don't have that information with me. Right.
Okay. And so would it be fair to say that the higher end of the range, as in the 80th percentile and beyond, would be for a riskier property?
You mean about this property, right? This is I couldn't say this is higher range of the cap rate, so it's middle.
Yeah, let me rephrase the question. So you have the 80th percentile here, but there's a range beyond that. So would that range beyond that be for a riskier property?
I can't answer that question because I'm not sure how the model works with that cap rate, the calculation or cap rates.
Okay, that's fair. But if cap rate is measuring the risk, then a higher cap rate would be for a riskier property, just logically, would it not?
Yes.
Okay. So in the third paragraph here, it says that the broker cap rates are used to further support the assessment department cap rates. Is that correct?
You mean in page 8, right?
Page 8 still, yeah, sorry, page 8.
Yeah. This is like we pick some sales to support our cap rates. Yes.
Okay, so then in looking at the subject, which would probably be considered a low rise B, would you agree that the brokers are suggesting 5% as the absolute like lowest value for those type of properties?
I can't agree with that.
Well, that's on your evidence. So we can move on, that's fine. So if we look specifically at this property, if you go to page 3 where you have the maps, the subject is in the neighborhood called Centennial at the intersection of Logan and Laura. Would you agree this would be considered an inferior location?
This is not really inferior, but it's in average, right? Kind of not that much bad location, but it's not, I mean, it's in average location. That's what I am thinking.
Have you been to this location?
No.
So in your opinion, are you saying that locations that have higher crime, lack of market housing, lack of businesses, that those would be average, not inferior?
Yeah, I mean, in downtown, we know those areas are a little bit inferior, but in this location, it's not that much bad. It's my opinion.
Okay. We'll leave it there for that question. So in looking at the ownership, this property operates as social housing, is that correct?
Yes.
And one of the buildings, the older of which would be over 130 years old at the date of physical condition of 2025, is that correct?
Yeah, it's old, but I think it's maintained and well kept. If not, that building can be present right now.
Okay. And that older building also has a heritage designation, is that correct?
Yes.
And since a heritage designation places a caveat on the title, would that not increase the risk of the property?
I think risk means it will increase the expenses for the property. I'm not sure about the risk.
So if a heritage property is limited, the owners in terms of what they can do with the property in terms of changes or tearing it down, for example, would that make it like more or less desirable to own that type of property?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So based on what we know about the location, age, do you think that the 5% cap rate is actually sufficient for this property?
I believe so.
Okay. And final questions, I'll just go to page 9 where you have your cap rate sales. So the purpose stated here is to substantiate the model, but is it fair to say that only 4 of the cap rates here are actually within the 20th to 80th percentile, where the majority of them are stated to fall?
Just this is like to present the information. So like we just picked some sales. So that's why we can't like provide the whole percentile to support the whole percentile here. So the purpose of presenting this to show the accuracy, that's all.
Yeah, and I respect that you can't provide everything, but if if most cap rates in the city are stated to fall within the 20th to 80th percentile, then most of your cap rate sales here should also fall within that range if it's substantiating the model, should it not?
I can't answer that question. I'm not sure about that.
Okay, so in looking at your cap rates, you have several below the 4.5% to 5% range. Would that be correct?
Yeah.
And if at the reference date, an investor could get a 4.5% return on a secure government bond, does it reasonably follow that that same investor would invest in real estate, which is known to be a risky investment or a moderate to high risk investment?
Is that in my brief?
Well, you
Or
have the cap rates in your brief, yes.
Ms. Cates, are you referring to the capitalization rate evidence on page 9 in this?
Yes, on page 9.
I believe that the assessor has stated that this is not evidence of the cap rate used on the subject property. It's just a general overview of some cap rates that were used in developing the model. So it is specific to the subject property.
Okay, I'll move on. Just one final question then. Have you provided the workups as part of your direct evidence for the cap rate sales?
yeah, as a rebuttal, we have provided that.
So as rebuttal, not direct evidence, correct?
No, not direct evidence. No.
Okay, thank you very much. That would conclude my questions on this property.
Excuse me. Thank you, Ms. Cates. Ms. Anderson, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are all Manitoba housing units, are they not?
Do you mean the comparables?
Manitoba housing?
Yes, this is a Manitoba
All of
housing.
them? All of them? I think they are.
Yeah.
You get a chance to inspect any of these properties?
No.
No. So, and all your presentations are model driven.
Yes.
So, but when we look at these figures, etc., they're almost like a standard model driven according to, I guess, location and age of the property.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Mr. Nuwan, I'm looking at I'm trying to establish from the applicant's questioning something about an older heritage rated building. And I'm looking on your pictures. Can you, first of all, I'd ask you, sorry, what page am I on? Okay, here we go. Page 11. We've got photos of the frontage of the property. Do you know when those photos were taken? Or I guess, do they represent the current physical condition of the property?
Actually, this is the Google Street View.
Okay.
So, yeah, I didn't I inspect that property.
Okay. It does say 2024 Google, I believe, on there's an imprint on the photo. Okay.
Yes.
Can you explain, so we've got an effective age. Can you explain where that heritage building is in any of this description or?
Like if you go to the page 3.
Page 3, okay.
Yeah. The white roof should be the heritage building. The with white roof.
Okay, sorry, there we are. Okay, got it. So the sky view, we'll call it. Okay.
Yes, yes.
So the Google Street View is taken from the right side, looking to the face of the row house units. Is the older building with the white roof, is that also rental units? Are they physically row houses?
Yes.
They are.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a one unit. Actually, I checked the the area. So it's included one unit there in that building.
so that's only one unit. Hmm.
Yes, and that the big building has other 3 units. Sorry, 4 units.
Okay, yeah, the frontage we see on Laura Street. Okay.
Yes,
All right. So how many units do we have in total here? Sorry.
5.
5. Okay. So the white roofed one with the heritage designation, that's been, do you know, has that been considerably renovated to reflect that effective age? Do you know?
In my knowledge, I don't know about that.
Yeah. And you have no access to notes on improvements on the property at all?
I check. It says it converted to the row house, but only that's the only information what I have from.
Okay. Thank you. All right. That is all my questions. Ms. Kate, do you have rebuttal?
I don't have rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay. If in the future, when we start an individual file, could either party please state that they've got rebuttal evidence so we can deal with it as we go along? I'd appreciate that. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Cates, bear with us 1 second, and we're going to pull up your brief before you start.
Thank you very much.
Okay, 444 Logan Avenue. When you are ready, Ms. Cates.
Thank you very much. So if you turn to page 2 of the brief, we have a summary of the facts of the property along with our requested assessment of $336,000. On page 6, we have our aerial map and Google Map view showing the location of this property. And then on page 7, some exterior photos, some current photos of the property. On page 8, we have our property description. So the subject property is on Logan Avenue at the southwest corner of its intersection with Laura Street in the Centennial area of Winnipeg. This is not an average location. This location is one of the most challenging locations in the city of Winnipeg. The property consists of two-story buildings, which were built in 1894 and 1990. An effective age of 1975 has been assigned, but we reject this effective age because to have buildings this far apart and say the whole property is 1975, it just doesn't follow. The site size is approximately 12,000 square feet. There are 5 units, which include 1 3-bedroom and 4 5-bedrooms, and there are 5 outdoor parking stalls noted. I also note that the older of the buildings has a grade 3 heritage designation. So if you turn to page 13, that's the start of our income approach. So given that the property is social housing, it functions on a rent geared to income basis, meaning people pay what they can based on a defined proportion of their income. So based on this, the rents that the property achieves are not market. So for the purpose of our report, we are not disputing the assessor's market rents of $1,097 per suite. And we have also used that in our analysis. Similarly, for social housing, they don't typically achieve a market vacancy ratio because there are wait lists to get into these type of properties. So for the purpose of our analysis, we've consulted CMHC and we've applied 5.3%. We did have expenses to refer to for this property. So we are using a higher expense ratio than the city. Based on our actual stabilization of the expenses, they are on the higher end. So what we've done to be prudent with the expenses is cap them at 65%. So just to clarify, the actual expenses would be higher, but we're going to cap them at 65% and capture everything else in the cap rate. Now, if you turn to page 14, this is an overview of our view on cap rates for social housing. So when we look at social housing properties, we view these, they're a distinct subset of multifamily properties. And that's the main difference between our positions and the assessor's positions today, is that their workups look at these properties as if they were market, whereas we are adjusting, and our adjustments for social housing cap rates come from text from the Appraisal Institute, as well as previous board decisions and other market research on social housing. So if you turn to page 15, you'll see Richard Poulton in his text on the valuation of market studies for affordable housing. He says that we should start with market-based cap rates and make appropriate adjustments to account for the differences with social housing. This is because social housing properties aren't transacting on the market in the same way as market housing. So we have to start at that baseline market rate and then adjust for any differences that are in play. So in terms of adjustments, these could be thought of in 4 broad categories that can be broken down into more specifics, but the 4 broad categories would include low cost or low quality construction, advanced age, declining neighborhood, and low income tenancy. So not every property has each one of these factors, but the property we're dealing with currently, and many of them to follow, have several of these. And the commonality is low income tenancy. So if you could go to page 16, there's a detailed overview of the effect of low income tenancy on the cap rate. But just to summarize, the reason that this is an issue is because of its link to deferred maintenance. These properties aren't earning enough revenue to cover their operating expenses. So what happens is that they rely on funding to cover those differences to keep them operational. But what's being left out is that they then don't have the funding necessary to do those preventative repairs and maintenance that market apartments would be doing. And what happens is that the issues get pushed off to a later date. And then over time, you see these issues not only build in number, but in severity as you push things to a later point and let them build up. And this concept can be seen as a bit theoretical, but I do have a good example here of a manageable housing property at 185 Smith, which had built in the 70s, lots of deferred maintenance, and you can see the building flooded, caused havoc on a lot of building systems. They ended up putting 3 million into it, but they were told they'd need another 20 million to bring it back up to par. And the point of this is to illustrate that these things don't happen overnight. It's years and years of issues being put off due to chronic underfunding. And we could see this at play. There's a government news release that I've included, which talks about 500 million in deferred maintenance across the housing portfolio. So even though the current property is Winnipeg housing, not manageable housing, it's the same idea that follows. And we could see that the funding that they're putting toward these properties currently is not enough to cover all of these. And so these assets do deteriorate over time. The second part of the aspect of operating at a loss or not having revenues cover their expenses is that when we're looking at this from a market perspective and we're using a market rent, that market rent of $1,097 a suite is a pretty big jump from what they're currently achieving. So while we're not suggesting that we should be using the current rates as market, it's just to say that these properties have never operated at a profit. They've always been RGI. And so if you're coming in as an investor looking at it, there is a risk that you're not going to be able to make that jump to achieve that higher income. And so that's all part of the adjustment for social housing. Now you'll see on page 18, a breakdown of the different adjustments that I've done on top of social housing. So we're also considering that it has a heritage designation. We're also considering the location. And just to point out that the suite mix would be considered atypical. We're not specifically doing an adjustment for that, but to note that units beyond 3 bedrooms are typically not seen in market housing. So at this stage, I think it would be a good segue if I could just briefly go through our separate cap rate study, and then that would cover it off for this property and the remaining properties on the docket. So if I could ask everyone to open up that separate document and let me know when I can begin on that.
Excuse me, are we referring to the apartment cap rate study?
Yes, that's correct.
Right.
Okay, thanks, just wanted to be on the same page.
Does everybody have it?
Yeah.
Mr. Merritt?
Yep.
Okay, Ms. Cates, can we just, I don't mean to show disrespect to the information, but can we kind of summarize it?
Yeah, I'm gonna give a super brief summary of the cap rate study and just hit the high points, and then that'll cover it off for this property and the remaining properties that we have today.
Yeah, okay, we'll have it entered into evidence every time we go into a next appeal, okay?
Okay, perfect. So may I begin the brief cap rate?
Yes, please.
Okay, so if you turn to page 2 of the cap rate study, we have some overview of essentially what a cap rate is. The important takeaway from here is that the cap rate includes 3 major items, being perceived risk, expectations for income appreciation, and the required return on other vehicles. So risk is a part of the cap rate. Riskier properties will have a higher cap rate. That naturally follows. On page 5, if you can turn there, toward the middle of page 5, we have the assessor cap rates. So while we do know the 20th and 80th percentiles, the entire range from the valuation manual is 3.5% to 7.95%. So properties that are riskier can go beyond that 80th percentile of 5.45%. And if the city's own model is suggesting that 7.95% is actually a top end range, then the cap rates that I'm proposing today in the range of 6 to 6.5% are actually quite reasonable. Toward the bottom of page 5, we have our summary of the broker market reports. So what we're seeing here from Colliers and Cushman for low rise is they're saying about 5 to 6, 5 to 5.75%, and they're showing no compression from last cycle. CBRE takes a bit more of an optimistic approach, but again, their base cap rate for low rise B, which is what we're going to be looking at today, would be 5 to 5.25%. And it is known that brokers are looking at more investment grade properties. So if they're saying 5 to 5.75, 5 to 6 for investment grade properties, then to say that these social housing properties that we're looking at today in inferior locations, inferior construction type, that they are low 5s would be to suggest that these are some of the best investments in the city, which I just don't think can hold. So on page 6 starts some discussion on the cost of borrowing. So just to hit the high point here, if the Bank of Canada rate at the reference date of April 1, 23 is 4.5%, meaning someone could get a GIC, which is secure, very low risk for that rate, then the city using cap rates that are similar or lower than this for real estate, which is known to be moderate to high risk, it doesn't make sense that the same investor would choose to go to real estate over a GIC with that disparity there. So that was the point I was trying to bring out in questioning earlier. If you turn to page 9, we have our factors that we consider for adjustment. So not all factors are present for each property, but some that we'll be touching on today will be building type and construction, durability and quality of income, location, to name a few. Now, if you go to page 11, we have our sale chart. So these are cap rates that we've stabilized, and our range is showing at 5.26% to 7.11%. So in our stabilizations, which I've provided all the details in Appendix D, but as an overview, we try to be as consistent as possible in our stabilizations with the way that we perform valuations of our other properties. When you look back to page 1 and how you calculate a cap rate, you stabilize 1 year of income to develop a cap rate. So while it can be great to have more data, 3 years of data is not required in order to stabilize a cap rate. The other point to make with calculating cap rates is you have to try to get into the mind of the purchaser and use some of that principle of anticipation of what can they reasonably expect to happen based on what they reasonably would have known when they purchased the property. So just as an example, for 345 Talbot, that property is shown by the broker reports, was listed mid-2022. It ended up closing through land titles in 2023. So the year right leading up to that would be 2021. That's the data that we have. And the broker report said that they can expect rents to be in a certain range, which was different to what they achieved previously. And so that purchaser would have reasonably expected to achieve those rents with similar expenses. And so that is just an example of how we stabilize our cap rates based on historical information, but also looking to market information such as CMHC or broker specific pro formas. If you turn to page 12, we have a table showing summarizing the sale price per suite. We also have the backup data in Appendix E. I think these can be a gauge, one of many for the value, but it shouldn't be relied upon 100% because for income producing properties, the income approach is going to be more reliable than doing a direct comparison on a per unit basis. Finally, toward the middle of the page, we have our summary of our cap rates that we're using, and these are assuming good quality properties in good locations. And that would conclude my cap rate presentation. The remainder of the document is the appendices, and potentially of interest might be Appendix D, which has our cap rate calculations and backup documentation. And just for your reference, that could be found starting on page 34. So now I'll just go back to my main brief to tie up this presentation.
Perhaps we could wait until everybody gets back to the main brief, please.
Absolutely.
Is everybody there? Mr. Nuwan, are you there?
Yep.
Mr. Merritt?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, Ms. Cates, when you're ready, please.
Sounds good. So I'll just go to page 20 of the main brief that has our income valuation workup. So on page 20, you'll see our net operating income of $21,815. We're using a 6.5% cap rate based on our base rates for what we're assuming about age. As well, we're accounting for all those other features that we've mentioned. And we feel this is a very reasonable cap rate for the property. We come to a value rounded of $336,000. And the remainder of the brief, we have our repair and maintenance breakdown, which isn't being used because we capped the expenses at 65%, but it is there for your reference. And then the appendix starts on page 23. We have the city valuation parameters, the financials that we've reviewed. As well, I've included the short form of the heritage report for the property. And that would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Nuwan, do you have rebuttal evidence?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Mr. Mohan, do we have that available? Is it in the,
I believe I have sent to the SharePoint. You might just need to refresh your SharePoint, but it should be in there. Let me know if it's not.
Okay, Mr. Nuwan, before you start on the rebuttal, we're going to find that document, please. I am not finding it after refreshing, Mr.
Should be under number 7. It should say August 2025 cap rate sales A&T rebuttal. Please, that should be the order on my screen that I'm seeing it as.
Okay, yes, you're right, I'm sorry.
Oh, all good, all good.
Okay. All right, does everybody have it? Okay, Mr. Merritt?
Yep.
Okay, Mr. Nguyen, when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. City of this is rebuttal for the Atlas Altus cap rate. City of Winnipeg rebuttal to the Altus 2025 cap rate sales analyst. So for the 2025 assessment with the reference date April 1st, 2023, Altus Group has evaluated the following sales in order to determine the capitalization rate. Capitalization rate derivation can be found in Appendix D on their capitalization rate. So you can see the sales we selected in here. So what we have done, we review these sales. So in page 2, you can see 345 Talbot Avenue. So what we found is this is only 1 year income and expense information, and that is not insufficient information for determining the cap rate. So also Altus calculations are rent levels are inconsistent with rents reported in the prior year. So in page, you can see the information in page 3 and page 4. You can see that the other sales 677 Maryland Street. So in here what we found 1 year of income and expense information is insufficient information for determining the cap rate. Altus calculation average rent levels are inconsistent with rent reported in prior year. So page 5, the information there, and page 6, we are talking about 738 St. Mary's Road. And same thing in here, 1 year of income and expense information, insufficient information for determine a cap rate. So Altus calculation average rent levels are inconsistent with the rent reported in prior years. Page 7, you can see the information, and page 8 also the information related to, and 100 Maryland Street. No actual data for calculate the cap rate. And page 10, you can see 2390 McPhillips Street. In here, what we found, Altus calculation average rent levels are inconsistent with the rent reported in the prior year. Basically, page 11 to 16, we show how we calculate the cap rates. Basically, we use 3-year stabilization to calculate the cap rate to stand on a solid ground to derive the consistent cap rate. Those are the information which I have reported today. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Cates, the assessors presented alternate calculations of your cap rate study. Any comments on his rebuttal?
I have some questions if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So in terms of the sale 1 to 3, which you're saying is unusable, is there an appraisal standard or an IAAO standard that shows you need 3 years of data, or is that the assessment department's preference?
I haven't have that information on my hand, so I can't answer that question. So
Okay. But you would agree that just because it's the assessment department's preference doesn't make these unusable based on a single year, correct?
Yeah, we are basically we are saying our cap rate is solid because we have like 3-year stabilization rate. Sorry, 3-year stabilization on income and expense. That's all we want to say there.
Maybe Ms. Cates, maybe I'll simplify this. The assessor or assessment department's policy, according to the assessor, in his opinion, is that three-year stabilization analysis is the correct way to develop cap rates. That's why he's presented the rebuttal. Obviously, you got your own opinion too, but maybe we could proceed from there, please.
Yes, will do. Okay, another question, sale 5, which you're saying is incorrect because it's not based on historical. But if the rents at the time of sale were below market and a purchaser knew that, then would they not have assumed they would have been able to charge the higher rents? And therefore the higher rents are actually more accurate?
So we calculate cap rate on reference date, and we based on every time based on the historical data. So so that's how we calculate these cap rates. So I believe that's the right way. So is that answer your question or?
Yes, yes. I think that'll conclude my questions. I think my points have come across here. Thank you.
Thank you. The panel regarding the rebuttals, or the rebuttal, pardon me, and your presentation, the panel will look at both methodologies and determine how much weight we're gonna put on each, on the rebuttal and your initial presentation, Ms. Cates and Mr. Nguyen, okay?
Yes.
Back to Ms. Cates's presentation. Mr. Merritt, any questions of the applicant's brief?
I just have one. Skates, you said you put a cap in regards to the expenses of 65%. So is that normal?
Sometimes for these older properties, they can run higher. So typically for well-managed market apartments, we'd see expenses in the range of 55% to mid 60%. So yeah, at Altus, it would be our standard to cap expenses at maximum 65 to 70%. I've chosen 65% to be prudent, or else it gets into just a bit of a theoretical valuation where you know. So that's what we've chosen to do. But yes, for some of the older properties and some of the social housing, especially, we do see expenses run higher. So sometimes we do have to cap them.
I have a tough time with that. Mainly because, you know, like you're estimating market value for income, and you should have the expenses also, which run high too. So, okay, I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Ms. Anderson, any questions of the applicant's evidence presented?
I was also going to have some questions about the capped expenses, but Mr. Merritt has covered that very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Cates, I'm looking at the picture on page 7 of the subject property with that older single building on page 7. So we have 4 row houses facing Laura Street, and we have this older house, and I think it's been stated, I believe the assessor didn't visit the property. Have you been here? Are you familiar with this property?
I haven't inspected this particular property in terms of an interior, but I am somewhat familiar with the location.
Okay. The older heritage building that we're seeing on page 7, that's considered 1 unit?
Yes, I believe so.
So it's from what I'm seeing here, it's actually a residential house that's considered an additional row house. That's the way it's being assessed? And can you help us out with that? Does that make sense to you or?
Yeah, so the thing with this house is that this wasn't the original location. So it's a heritage property. It was moved to this location. And then in the 90s, then this other addition was built presumably to house more people. With heritage properties, there's only so much they can change with them, so they probably weren't able to put more units into that. But that would kind of be the background of why the houses or row houses are kind of positioned in this manner.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I have one more question that I'd like to ask.
of course, Mr. Merritt.
Ms. Gates, this property, the subject property is a heritage building. And the city's using 5% cap rate, you're using 6.5. So just wondering what percentage is like dictates the heritage part? Is that a 0.5%? Is that 1%?
So typically for adjustments, we would go by 0.25%, so 0.25% for simplicity. So with this cap rate, I'm assuming a starting point of 5.75. I'm not agreeing with the city's effective age of 1975, which would bring it up to a higher starting value. I'm meeting somewhere in the middle. I'm assuming a starting point of 5.75, and I'm doing 0.25 adjustments for each of the different factors as seen fit.
So if it wasn't a heritage building, what cap rate would you use?
For this specific property, I mean, the argument could be you could maybe go down to 6.25, but in my opinion, the social housing and the location, I think 6.5% does make sense for the property. Yeah.
All right, I thank you very kindly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Ms. Cates, my last question to you is, I believe you made a comment about there's a waiting list for occupancy of these units in, I guess, what you call the less desirable neighborhood. Is that accurate?
I would say there's a waiting list for social housing properties in general. I wouldn't be able to specify necessarily locations, but yes, typically, because there's a lack of affordable housing, there will be kind of a central waiting list and then people will get assigned to different properties. That's my understanding of how that works.
Okay, okay. Thank you. I just wanted clarification. Okay. Mr. Nuwan, any requirement for summary on this?
Yes, sure. So basically, may I go ahead? Can I go ahead?
Oh, yes, of course. Yes.
Sure. So basically, in this property, we use like a less average rent for the units. So because those are those non-profit housing, we provide we consider as low quality buildings. So because of that, we calculate less, that means low average rent for the units. So also we have given them a higher expense ratio. That means we already consider their way of operating. That means they have like the applicant mentioned a lot of some income. It's some kind of problem with the properties. So we already capture those. And also I have to mention in here, they have higher R&M. So that means, as example, the 2023 2022 RMN repair and maintenance per unit 11,978. So that means they are doing a maintenance for the building. All, I believe our assessment is fair for the property. Thanks. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Cates, any requirement for summary, please?
If I may just summarize at the end of the docket, that would be good, unless you want me to summarize for each property.
Yes, they're individual appeals, so I'd like you to summarize for individual properties, please.
Okay, sounds good. So what I would ask the board for this property is to take a look at the actual that we submitted along with our in-depth cap rate study. No one's suggesting that the property isn't maintained in terms of the R&M, but I would suggest look at the actuals that is guided by current methodology on appraisal theory, previous orders, etc. I do not agree with the city's assessment that their value is capturing everything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I close this one, Mr. Nguyen, can we assume that your rebuttal evidence is going to be entered for each subject property today?
Yes, I'm going to brief it as I can. Yeah.
Very much. Okay, that concludes 444 Logan Avenue. Next item on the docket is item number 2, file number 24-2870. Address is 352 Pacific Avenue, roll number 1307154850. Mr. Nguyen, bear with us while we pull up your brief, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. File number 242870, roll number 1307154850, 352 Pacific Avenue, roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023, assess value 4,383,000. Classification, we have two classification, 20 residential and 10 residential. Liability grantable. We have 20 buildings on site. Effective age bill, actual age bill 1977 and 1978. Effective age bill same as 1977 and 1978. Number of suites 50. You can see in page 2 request for income information. So page 3 you can see the location of the property and also aerial view of the property. Page 4 subject sales sales history of the property. No sales history for subject property. And then page 5 you can see income values summary. In this complex we have 3 one-bedrooms, 18 two-bedrooms, 23 bedrooms, and 9 four-bedrooms. In total we have 50 units. Average monthly rent per unit 897. So we have in here 10G and 20G income valuation summary. I'll read the first 10G one. Gross potential income 280,001, and vacancy rate 5.3, and effective gross income comes at 265,161. Expense ratio 56.17. and net operating incomes comes at 116,220 using 5.1 capitalization rate. 10G value comes at 2,278,000. I'll read the roundup value. 2,279,000 for 10G. And I'm going to go with the 20G valuation, income value summary. Gross potential rent comes at 258,463. Vacancy rate same 5.3. Effective gross income comes at 244,764. Expenses rate 56.17. Net operating income comes at 107,280. Using 5.1 capitalization rate, estimated market value for 20G part comes at 2,104,000. In page 6, you can see rent comparables. I have to mention I use a little bit newer comparables to show market trends here because it's hard to find a commercial row housing in the same area. Page 7, we have calculated the CMHC rent. Based on the CMHC rent, the percentage of market rent is 62.23. Basically, they are like getting discount 37.7% from the market rent. Reason for this discount is accounting the nature of the operation. That means this is a non-for-profit row house. So page 8, capitalization rates. You can see capitalization rates in here. As I said, page 9, capitalization rates evidence. The following is a sample of actual sales that took place during the reference period. The purpose of for showing this individual capitalization rate is to illustrate the accuracy of the model and substantiate the model derived capitalization rate that are not meant to be comparable specific to the subject property. As like mentioned in the first brief, the 727 Sargent Avenue should be the capitalization rate should be corrected as 3.45, and please ignore the 203 Woodlawn Street one. And page 10, municipal assessment experts, and page 11 to 14, Google Street View of the property. And page 15, there I add the permits they took out for the works has been done to the property. And this is my end of my presentation. I believe the assessed value of 4,383,000 is a fair value for the property. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Cates, any questions on the evidence presented by the assessor?
Yeah, just a few new questions. So given that the property has 20 buildings, would you agree that this design or layout would require significant maintenance?
Yes, I agree with that. because
Okay.
yeah.
And so if regular maintenance is not performed, then it would follow that a certain amount of capital would have to be invested into the property to keep it running. Would that be correct?
We can't exactly say they are not doing the maintenance because we have some permits, and also they have higher, I mean, they have average RMN, right? So I can't exactly agree with your saying.
But permits don't refer to regular maintenance. Would that be correct? Permits are every once in a while, like more capital work. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's fair to say.
Okay, and the property is wood frame. Would you agree that that would not be considered as high quality as maybe masonry would be?
Yeah, it's not a high quality, but that's a average one, right? Like we can see the apartment building like in a high quality. Yeah, this is not a high quality one, but yeah, this is a base on a wood frame. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And then just one final question, and I understand that we don't disagree on rents, but just on your page 7 CMHC rent chart, are you able to verify those figures with the CMHC? Just as context, when I was looking at the Zone 2 private townhouse, I got different figures. So I guess more of a question / comment on that one that I noticed with some of the CMHC zone charts that you included. But I'll leave that one there.
I believe we use the right zone chart. Right now I don't have on my hand those charts, so I can't answer that question.
Okay, that's fine. And just to clarify for the board, the 1-bedroom had no data for 22 from CMHC, but it would be 838 for 2021. The 2-bedroom.
Because like in that chart you have like average for the as I remember, I don't have chart on my desk, or so for 1 to 5, as I remember, 1 to 5 zoning, they have like average rent for that 1 to 5 zoning. So I select that average rent.
Okay, so it's actually the core area 1 to 4. It's not Zone 2 Centennial then.
Yeah, because they didn't mention that because that's I think that's is empty, right? So I use that.
Okay, thank you. And I would just ask that my previous questions on cap rate and location just be carried forward for the sake of expediency, if not asking the same questions again, if that's suitable to the panel.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Cates.
Thank you.
Mr. Merritt, any questions of the assessor's evidence?
I have none, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
I just have one question about parking. I think on your page 1, if I am seeing it correct, that there is no parking, and yet in the diagram there looks to be a diagram on page 3, the overhead picture. There looks to be some parking on the site. Does that come into factoring into your analysis? Is there enough parking for the number of units that there are there?
Actually, yes, it should be factored into the average rent, but we don't like directly as I know, we don't factor those one like directly how many numbers and then factor those, but that's value derived from the average rent. So I think it will not much effect on the value of the building.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I need.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Nguyen, did you happen to tally up the value of the permits issued between 2021, 22 for exterior and interior alterations?
Yeah, those values, you need the total value or the
Maybe I'll put it this way. I did a quick calculation. It was $2.6 million. Would you agree with that approximately?
honestly, I didn't total it. I believe that could be the number.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, what is my second question? The breakdown of class code 20 and class code 10. Class code 10 is a building with less than 4 building units, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And class code 20 is building units with 4 or more units
Yes, that's
within
correct.
the complex, right? And that's why there's a code in the classification.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's why they have like 2 classification.
all right, perfect. Okay, that's my only question. Thank you. Ms. Cates, you had no rebuttal, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Bear with us 1 second. Shall pull up your brief. Okay, Ms. Cates, please, 352 Pacific Avenue.
Okay. So if you start on page 2, we have our requested assessment of $3,438,000. On page 6, we have our site maps and Google Map view. So you could see from the aerial photograph that this property is divided into 3 distinct parcels, which I've labeled, but they're all considered part of this one property. Now, if you start on page 7, I've included exterior photos from the different streets that the buildings front on. So starting on page 7, you can see some of that exterior work on Pacific Avenue for those townhouse units. Moving through on page 9, you could see some of the exterior photos from Ellen Street. Starting on page 10, you can see exterior photos from Ross Avenue. And then that would take us to page 13, where I have my property description. So as mentioned, the subject property is divided into 3 separate parcels. Parcel 1 is located on Pacific Avenue. Parcel 2 is on Pacific Avenue at its intersection with Ellen Street. Parcel 3 is on Ross Avenue at its intersection with Ellen Street. The subject property is in the same area as the previous in Centennial. There are 22-story buildings, and the property is a mix of townhouse and detached houses. They were built in 1977, and the total land size is about 2.2 acres. There is no parking area noted, but to pick up on Ms. Anderson's questions, there appears to be parking toward the rear of the buildings, but an exact count I don't have at this time. So if you turn to page 18, that's the start of our income approach. In essence, we're not disputing the NOI of this property. It's social housing, but unlike the last property, we don't have good expense data to use. So we are going to utilize the same 56.2% expense ratio. That's within range of what we'd expect for a market apartment. And then we're going to capture any other differences in the cap rate. So if you turn to page 23, we have our breakdown of some of the facts that we looked at for this property. We are disputing the assessor's cap rate of 5.1%. We are using a cap rate of 6.5%, and that is to account for the vast nature of this site with all of those individual buildings, same social housing adjustment. We are doing a bit of a factor for condition. This property, I did go to see the interiors last cycle in preparation for the prior cycle's hearing. So we did get to see some of the units there, and I've included those in my appendix. So you'll see from those photos what a typical unit looks like at the property. As well, we did ask to see a renovated unit. So typically at these properties, they're only going to do as much renovation as they have to keep the property functional for people to live in. So when you see those units that are where a lot of elements have been renovated, it would have been because the units were in such a condition that they had to do those type of renovations. Otherwise, they try to salvage what they can from the units. So that leads us to our 6.5% cap rate. On page 25, I put it into our income valuation chart so you can see how that fits together. So with the NOI of $223,500 and a 6.5% cap rate, that leads us to our value of $3,438,000 rounded. To comment a bit on some of the exterior work, these properties are known to not have regular maintenance because of the issues that I described earlier with underfunding. And what tends to happen is the properties then, once they get that capital injection, then they could do that work that's been put off. So if you have properties that were built in the late 70s, it's not shocking they'd have to spend $1 million or $2 million in exterior work to keep those properties functional and secure for people to live in. So as mentioned, I have an appendix starting on page 27. I've included some interior photos of what a typical unit looks like. And then later on in the brief, you can see what a vacated unit looks like and what a renovated unit might look like. And that would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Nguyen, any questions of the assessor's evidence?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Nguyen, for the record, can you enter your document regarding your rebuttal?
Yes.
So we will enter that as evidence. Thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions of the applicant, please?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any question?
I just have one. So you are agreeing with the NOI is exactly the same. There's just a dispute in regards to the cap rate.
That's correct.
Okay, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Ms. Cates, first question or first requirement we have, the rule contains 2 classifications. We need a breakdown of the individual class code 10 and 20 valuation, not just the summary or a total.
Okay, so our NOIs would be the same. It's just our cap rate. So I'll pull up the city's brief and read those numbers out.
Yeah.
Breakdown.
I will provide them to you. It's 116220.
Yep.
At 6.5%.
Yep.
Equals, please.
That would be 1,788,000. So that's 1,788.
Okay, that's rounded, right? Okay.
That's rounded.
And the next NOI is 107280. Capped at 6.5%.
That would be 1,650,461. So rounded, that would be 1,650.
Okay. Could you add total those two to make sure they equal your requested total value?
Yes, one moment. Yeah, that looks about right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My next question is regarding the photos you've provided. Exterior, do you know when those were taken?
So the exteriors are from Street View and they are current to 2024. And the interiors are from 2020, late 2022 when I visited. I made sure to update the exteriors based on current for accuracy.
Okay, so the exteriors reflect current physical condition, that's correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and the interiors, possibly yes, possibly no? Current physical condition?
What I would say is that the interior photos that I've provided, trying to go to these properties every year isn't necessarily feasible. So I'm assuming that the interiors, would be similar, and based on all my visits to different social housing properties, it looks about right.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. That is all my questions. Mr. Nuon, requirement for summary, please.
No, thanks for this one.
Ms. Cates, requirement for summary.
I'm also good, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes 352 Pacific Avenue. Shall we do one more, or shall we take a quick 7-minute break? What does the panel or anybody think?
Break, please.
Okay, so excuse me, Mr. Mohan, we're gonna recess for 7 minutes, please. Thank you, Mr. Mohan. I will now call the hearing back to order. Next item on the docket is 165 Maryland Street. Mr. Newman, bear with us 1 second, please, while I find my way. Okay. Mr. Newman, when you are ready, please. 165 Maryland Street. That's item number 3, file number 24-1855.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 241855, roll number 12090392500, 165 Maryland Street, roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023, assessed value 1,265,000, classification 20 residential, liability taxable. Property description, 2 buildings on site, and effective year built 1994 and actual year built also 1994. Outdoor parking 9. I have recommendation here. So the value should be revised to 1,097,000 because we sent a original value as an error. So that's my recommendation.
Okay. I guess, Mr. Newman, can you explain what was changed in the characteristics before we talk to the applicant?
Actually, we accidentally sent the land value to the applicant, sorry, to the owner. So that's the reason. No change in the income summary. So this is the original income summary for the property.
Okay. I guess I'll ask you now, Ms. Cates, I'm not sure if you're aware of this recommendation. Are you in agreement or are you rejecting it?
I appreciate the recommendation, but I would like to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Mr. Nuwan, please proceed with your comparables and everything in your brief, please.
Thank you. Page 2, request for income and expense information. Subject property doesn't have any sales record. You can see in page 3 location and the aerial picture of the property. And page 4, you can see the income valuation summary. This row house has 12 units, 12 4-bedroom units. Average monthly rent for unit 1,058. Class and liability 20T. Gross potential income 152,000. 359, vacancy rate 3.6, effective gross income 146,874, expense ratio 58.91%, and net operating income comes at 60,351. Using 5.5 capitalization rate, estimated market value comes at 1,097,000. Market value per suite 91,416. You can see in page 5 rent comparable. So I'm not going to read one by one. So page 9, you can see CMHC market rent data. Basically, this is percentage of market rent is 63.05. Basically, I just want to show the average rent is reasonable. That's why I add this chart in there. Page 7, capitalization rates, and page 8, capitalization rates evidence. As I mentioned in before, 727 Sargent Avenue, the capitalization rate should be 3.45, and please ignore the 203 Woodlawn Street to consideration. And page 9, Municipal Assessment Act expert, and page 10 to 11, you can see the Google view of the property. And page 12, the income and expense information. Page 13 to 19, I add the Municipal Assessment Act. This is, I believe, 1,265,000 is a fair value for this property. This is my end of my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Cates, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
I have no new questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions of the assessor?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I have no questions either. Ms. Cates, before you start, let us get to your brief, please. Ms. Cates, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. So
And
if you turn,
sorry, before you start, we'll enter into evidence your document regarding the cap rate study.
yes,
Thank you. Go ahead, thanks.
thank you. So if you turn to page 2, you'll see our requested assessment of $894,000. We're just concerned with the value today, not the classification liability. If you turn to page 6, you'll see the aerial maps and the Google map view of the property. And on page 7, I have some exterior photographs that should be fairly current. On page 9, we have our property description. So the subject property is located on the east side of Maryland Street at its intersection with Sarah Avenue in the West Broadway area. The property consists of two-story row house buildings built in 1994. The site size is approximately 21,000 square feet. And there are 12 units at the property and 12 outdoor parking stalls noted. Now, if you turn to page 14, we have the start of our income approach. So similarly, this property had subsidized rents shown on their financials. So for the purposes of the analysis, we are going to use the same rents as assessed of $1,058 per suite to make sure we're using a market rent. We are also going to use a 3.6% vacancy rate based on CMHC. For this property, we are going to dispute the expenses as the actual expenses are higher than 58.9%. So we're using expenses of $95,468 or 65%. And these expenses have also been capped because the actual expenses were running higher. So again, we're capping the expenses to be prudent, so as not to have an artificially low NOI. So if you go to page 19, we have the overview of our cap rate. So we are applying a premium. We're using 5.75% based on our cap rate study and similar logic. Social housing row house. I'm not doing a location adjustment. It is in West Broadway, which I would typically consider to be a less desirable location, but it is right on the border with Wolseley. So we're not doing a location adjustment in this case. If you turn to page 21, we have our income and expense breakdown. So you'll see we're using effective gross income of $146,874. We have capped our expenses as mentioned. This gives us an NOI of $51,406, and with a 5.75% cap rate, a rounded value of $894,000. I've also provided the R&M breakdown that we have on page 22. We have 3 years averaged here. Those aren't directly used in the analysis because of the capping of the expenses, but they are there for your review. And then my appendix starts on page 24, and that includes the financials that we've looked at, and then just some background information as with the other social housing briefs. So that would conclude my presentation on 165 Mary Lynch Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. And are we gonna admit your evidence or your document about the rebuttal to the assessor?
Yes.
Ms. Cates, did you have rebuttal? I'm sorry.
I don't have rebuttal.
Did you enter a document before when that was during the cap rate study, is that right?
I did not have a rebuttal submitted for any of the matters. I would just ask that my cap rate study be put
Yeah,
forward.
okay, yeah. My mistake. Okay, thank you. Okay, that concludes Ms. Cates. Excuse me. Brief. Mr. Nguyen, you've had rebuttal to the applicant's evidence. We've admitted that. Is that right?
Yes, right. That's
Okay, thank you. Any questions of the applicant?
right. I have one question. Page 21. About how they comes with that 6-point expense ratio. So in page 21, the average expense ratio shows 62.9. So, but the expense ratio capped at 6.5. What's the basis for that?
So I would look more toward the expense dollar amount rather than the ratio, because of subsidies that were counted in the income for 2020. As you could see from line item 11, those ratios are off, but we wouldn't really include subsidies as part of the income analysis. So the ratios just depend on how much income is coming in, because it's expenses divide effective gross income. So I would look more at the dollar amounts. So you see 2020 expenses at roughly 101,000, 2022 expenses at roughly 126,000. So 95,000 kind of fits within that range.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Nguyen?
That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions of the applicant's evidence?
Mr. Chairman, did they withdraw the classification and liability? She sign off, or does she have to sign off?
Was that, Mr. Zach, was that included in the application?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Both
Yes.
classification and liability.
The applicant had stated she wasn't going to proceed with that. Ms. Cates, you would be required to sign off on that request,
Okay,
appeal.
okay,
Mr. Mohan will provide a document for you to sign.
sounds good.
Okay, thank you. So for the record, the request for classification has been withdrawn. Anything else, Mr. Merritt?
I think that's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out. Excuse me. Ms. Anderson, any questions of the applicant?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have no questions either. Mr. Nguyen, any requirement for summary?
Not for this one, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Cates, any requirement for summary?
I'm good as well, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes 165 Maryland Street. Next item on the docket is item number 4, file number 24-2776. The address is 651 Cavalier Drive. And we're dealing with a 2025 Realty Assessment Appeal. Mr. Nguyen, bear with us, please. (651) Cavalier Drive. When you're ready, Mr. Nguyen.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. File number 242776, roll number 0722071500, address 651 Cavalier Drive, roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023, assess value 5,766,000, classification 20 residential, liability grantable. This is a commercial row house, 2 buildings on site, actual build year 1972, effective build year 1972, number of suites 48. Page 2, you can see a request for income information, and also you can see the subject property sale history, no sales history for subject property, and also you can see the location of the property in page 2. You can see the Safeway nearby the subject property, and they have some kind of stores around the subject property. In page 3, you can see the aerial picture. And page 4, income value summary. We have 15 2-bedroom, 23 3-bedrooms, and 10 4-bedrooms. Altogether, we have 48 units. Average monthly rent per unit 1,285. Gross potential rent 740,287. Vacancy rate 2.6. Effective gross income comes at 721,040. Expense ratio 56.42. Net operating comes at 314,229. Cap rate we have used 5.45, and estimated market value comes at 5,766,000. Market value per suite 120,100. 125. Rent, you can see the current rent comparable. So those rent comparable support the subject property. Page 6, you can see the CMHC rent. Actually, they are in percentage of market rent 80. Sorry, they are in 80.166% of percentage of the market rent. That means they are getting around over 18% discount on the market rent. We are doing that because this is a non-profit social housing, and to capture their quality, and we value as these properties or every time in a below average market apartment. So that's why we use a higher expense ratio as a 56.42 and those rents. In page 7, you can see the capitalization rates. Page 8, capitalization rate evidence. As mentioned before, 727 Sargent Avenue, the cap rate should be 3.45, and please ignore the 203 Woodlawn Street. Page 9, Municipal Assessment Act assert. Page 10 to 12, Google Street View of the property. This is my end of my presentation. I believe the assessed value is fair for this property. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Cates, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
I have no new questions for the assessor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions of the assessor?
I have none, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions?
Also no questions, thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions either. Thank you. Ms. Cates, when you are ready, please.
So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment of $5,237,000. On page 6, we have our aerial map and Google map view, so you could see the size of this property from the aerial view. And then starting on page 7, I have some exterior photographs which are current. Page 8, we have our property description. So the subject property is located on the east side of Cavalier Drive, north of Portage in the Crestview area. There are two-story row house buildings that were built in the early 70s. The site size is about 3.3 acres. And there are 48 units, which are skewed toward larger units. And I would say again that units beyond 3 bedrooms would be atypical by market standards. And we also have 48 parking stalls noted. So if you go to page 13, we have the overview of our income approach. We're not in dispute with the NOI, but I just wanted to comment on a couple of points from the assessor's presentation. In terms of comparison with CMHC and then saying that the current rents are discounted, that's not really founded. CMHC averages are based on a range of properties. Nicer properties will pull the averages up. So if we have a social housing property that has very utility grade finishes, it should be below what the CMHC averages are because those averages are for market rents. Additionally, in terms of the expenses, we are going to use the 56.4% of EGI, but that would not be considered high expenses. Market apartments of this vintage that are well managed would be in the mid 50s to 60%. So this would be what we consider a market ratio. And so we're gonna capture everything in terms of the extra expenses associated with this type of commercial row house property in the cap rate. So if you go to page 18, we have the overview of our cap rate for this property. So our approach is consistent with the other properties that we've looked at. We are making an adjustment given social housing, and it is a row house property, and those expenses would exceed 56%. But the location isn't a factor with this one as it was with some others. So we are taking that into account. So we're using a cap rate of 6% as opposed to the city at 5.45%. Now, if you turn to page 20, we have this into our income and expense spreadsheet. So you'll see with the NOI of $314,229 and a 6% cap rate, that gives a rounded value of $5,237,000. And our appendix starts on page 22, and we have the city evaluation page and the same text as in some of the other briefs for social housing. And that would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates, pardon me. And you will enter into evidence your cap rate study for this subject?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Mr. Nguyen, any questions on the applicant's evidence presented?
Actually, we have same net operating income, so the only dispute with the cap rate. Because of that, I don't have any questions, but we have the rebuttal in here, right?
So to summarize, the applicant has accepted all the parameters presented by the assessor. The only change is the capitalization rate presented. That be fair? Okay, thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions?
I was wondering if you had been in to any of these units. Have you inspected these units? Because we don't have interior shots of this one.
Yeah, I have not inspected this property. I've inspected some properties later on in the docket, but not this property. So to answer your question, I don't have interior photos. So what I've done for the analysis is I'm just assuming an average condition. So I'm not making a condition adjustment to any properties that I haven't been to or not like familiar with the interiors.
Okay, thank you very much. And that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Merritt, any questions of the applicant?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I have none either. Mr. Nguyen, any requirement for summary?
No, thanks.
Thank you, and we'll enter into evidence your rebuttal to the applicant's information. Ms. Cates, any requirement for summary on this subject?
No, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes 651 Cavaliers Drive. Next item on docket is item number 5, file number 24-1391. The address is 660 Cavalier Drive. Bear with me, Mr. Nguyen. When you're ready, sir, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 241391, roll number 07432416000, 660 Cavalier Drive, roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023. Assess value, we have two classification for 20 residential, 662,000 for the 20 residential, and 530,000 for the 10 residential, altogether 1,192,000, liability taxable for both. Number of building on site 2, effective build year 1964, actual build year is also same. number of suite 9. Page 2, you can see request for income information and subject property sales history. You can see there's a one sale on August 2022. And also you can see the location of the property in page 2, and page 3 you can see the aerial picture of the property. Page 4, you can see income value summary. We have 2 9-bedrooms and average monthly rent per unit 1,009. We have 2 classification. So I'm going to read the 10T first. Gross potential income 48,440. 454, and vacancy rate 2.6. Effective gross income comes at 47,194. Expense ratio of 46.14. Net operating income comes at 25,419 with 4.8 capitalization rate. 10T estimated market value comes at 530,000, and I'm going to read the 20T income summary information. Gross potential rent 60,567, vacancy rate 2.6, effective gross income 58,992, expense ratio 46.14, and net operating income comes at 31,773 with 4.8 capitalization rate. Estimated market value comes at 662,000, and you can see the rent comparable. In here I have to mention it's hard to find the row house in the same area. Because of that, I use little 2018 and 2014 comparables in here. Also I add the CMHC average rent calculation on the page 6. The percentage of market rent 70.99. You can see the capitalization rates on page 7. Page 8, capitalization rate evidence. As I mentioned before, 727 Sargent Avenue, the cap rate should be changed to 3.45, and please ignore 203 Woodland Street for analyzing. Page 9, you can see the Municipal Assessment Act excerpt, and page 10 to 13 you can see the interior picture of the building. Actually, I didn't inspect this one. This is from their website. You can see the quality of interior in here, and page 16 you can see 2022 income and expense information. Actually, their net operating income supported our net operating income. Page 15 and 16 also income information. So I believe 1.1 million 192,000 is fair value for this property. This is end of my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nuwan. Ms. Cates, do you have any questions of the applicant, or pardon me, the assessor's evidence?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I have no questions either. Ms. Cates, give me 1 second here, 660 Cavalier Drive. When you're ready, please.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment of $1,044,000. On page 6, we have our maps. And on page 7, we have some current exterior photos. On page 8, we have our property description. So the subject is located on the west side of Cavalier Drive between its intersections with Fairlane Avenue and Portage Avenue in Crestview. The property consists of 2 one-story row house buildings, which were built in 1964. Site size is approximately 23,000 square feet. There are 9 units, which are all 2 bedrooms, and there are 9 outdoor parking stalls noted. So in contrast to the other properties we've dealt with, this is a market apartment. It's not social housing. So moving through, our income approach starts on page 13. So for the purpose of the report, we're not disputing the assessor's NOI. Our NOI based on stabilized amounts is actually a bit higher, so we're using that. The total NOI that we're using is $62,635. I understand that this property is split between class code 10 and 20. From what I can tell, it looks like 5 units are class code 20 and 10 units are class code 10. So based on that logic, the class code 20 NOI that we're using would be $34,797.22. And the class code 10 NOI that we're using would be $27,837.77. We are disputing the cap rate of 4.8%. 4.8 is below what the brokers would even suggest for a market apartment. That would be the best of the best stock. That's what their low rates are. It would typically be for the newer builds filled with amenities. So we're putting a rate of 6%. This property is on the older side, so it would have a base cap rate of 5.75%. It's wood frame. Wood frame deteriorates faster than masonry or concrete, and that is evidenced if you put 2 very similar properties into the cost approach. You would get a different age life for wood frame buildings. The amenities at this property would be consistent with what we'd expect for row houses in terms of individual entrances and suite laundry. And the suites are on the smaller side, which is why the rents are lower. Granted, they are all 2 bedrooms, but they are quite small. So if you go to page 15, we have our income and expense breakdown. So you'll see we've stabilized income and expenses based on 3 years of data. So income is based on the most recent year. That's typically how it will be stabilized. So we've used the 2022 income. Vacancy is already included just based on the way they've reported it. So we've not included an additional vacancy allowance. So essentially the owner reports an effective rent. And that value is $102,798. We've added in parking income at $1,035, some miscellaneous income for an effective gross income of $104,111. We've stabilized expenses based on 3 years. So what we've done is shown in the remarks column on the right-hand side of the sheet. So if there's no comment there, it could be assumed we're stabilizing based on the most recent year. But otherwise, there are certain values where we've used averages, and those are values that can fluctuate from year to year. So as mentioned, our total NOI is $62,635. with a 6% cap rate. That gives us a value of $1,044,000 rounded. We have our R&M on page 16, the breakdown. 1443 suite would be considered on the lower end. And then the appendix starts on page 18. So we have some interior marketing photos. So I would suggest that these would be some of the better photos since this is what's on the website. And then following page 22, we have the city valuation, and following that is just all of the financials that we've considered. So that would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keach. And for the record, you'll enter your rebuttal evidence to the from the assessor, or the assessor, pardon me.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Nuwan, any questions of the applicant?
No question.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions of the applicant?
Just one, Ms. Cates, you didn't break down the 20 or the 10, but I did for you.
Oh, I could read it out again. I did have the NOIs, but not the total
Okay,
values.
so the 20 is gonna be 580. And the other ones, the 10 is gonna be 464.
In terms of the total value?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
okay. Just so you know.
Would you mind repeating that, please, Mr. Merritt?
Okay, the 20 is going to be 580,000. And the 10 is gonna be 464. So it comes to a total of 1,044.
Okay. Thanks. So that's an NOI of 27,837 for
Yeah,
class.
all I did is do the percentage of the with the way at the city's number. You know, I think it's like 55% and the other one's 45. So they're
Okay.
close.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that, Ron.
You're welcome.
Ms. Anderson, any questions of the applicant?
Just one. You said in your presentation that you agreed with the city's NOI, and I believed you spoke quickly, so I could claim error on writing the numbers down. But the NOI you were using was 52,635, is that correct?
So since the city's NOI is lower, I put in the brief that I'm not disputing the NOI, but I am using the slightly higher NOI of 62,635, so 62,635.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Ms. Cates, I'm looking at the appendix with the pictures of the subject property. Does that reflect the current physical condition?
I haven't verified the photos. This is what's on the website, so I would assume that it would be reflective, but there is a bit of a disclaimer on the website saying it may not be reflective of the actual units available. So that's about all I could comment on those photos. So yeah, I would assume the units are in somewhere between average and good condition, and that these should be reflective since it's what's on the website for the vacant units.
Okay, and page, I'm sorry, your work up on page. What are we on? Oh, boy.
15?
15, yes. Those are actual, are those actual rents from 3 years, 20 to 22?
Yes, they are.
Potential gross rents, okay. So this is a copy of an income and expense statement that you had available to you?
Yeah, so essentially what we do is we take a look at the historical income and expenses, and then we put them into our own spreadsheet just to make it kind of easier to read and look at. But yeah, all of the originating documents are in the appendix if you wanted to verify any of those figures.
Okay, no, that's okay. So by doing that analysis, your net operating income ends up being a little bit, well, yeah, higher than the assessors, but you're applying a 6% cap rate on your workup for a net operating income of 62,635. Is that correct?
That's correct, and sometimes that happens where it can come in a little higher than the model, and then we just defer to our own stabilization.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Thanks for the explanation. That is all my questions. Mr. Nguyen, any requirement for summary?
Mm, no, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cates, any requirement for summary?
Oh, no, thank you. I'm good, thanks.
Okay, thank you. That concludes 660 Cavalier Drive. Next item on the docket, is everybody okay to proceed without a break?
Yep.
Okay, everybody good? Okay. Next item on the docket is item number 6, file number 24-2881. Address is 7 Riverstone Road. And Mr. Nguyen, bear with me 1 second. We shall find your brief. And there we are. Mr. Nguyen, when you are ready, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. File number 242881. Roll number 0500298800. Address 7 Riverstone Road. Roll year 2025. Reference date April 1st, 2023. Assess value 4,945,000. Classification residential, 20 residential. Liability grantable. Number of buildings on site 2. Effective actual year build 1988. Effective year build same 1988. Number of suite 40. Page 2, request for income information. You can see the information. Subject don't have any no sales history for the subject property. You can see page 3, location and aerial picture of the property. Page 4, income value summary. We have 22 2-bedrooms and 18 3-bedrooms. In total, we have 40 units. Average monthly rent per unit 1,163. Gross potential rent comes at 558,466. Vacancy rate 3%. Effective gross income comes at 541,712. Expense ratio, we have used 54.81. Net operating comes at 244,800. We have used 4.95 cap rates. So estimated market value comes at 4,945,000. Market value per suite 123,625. And you can see comparable rents on page 5. And you can see CMSC rent calculation. The property gets 76.47 comparing to the market rent. That means it's kind of 20 near to 20, over 23 point discount. We do that because we have to account the nature of the non-profit operations, and because of that we use low quality for these kind of apartments units, and also they get a higher expense ratio for 54.81. So in page 7 you can see capitalization rates, and page 8, capitalization rate evidence. As I said, 727 Sargent Avenue, the capitalization rate should be 3.45, and please ignore 203 Woodlawn Street information. And then page 9, municipal assessment at excerpt. And page 10, I just add one permit to show they are doing some maintenance, that's all. And page 11, you can see Google, 11 and 12, you can see the Google view of the property. So 4,945,000. I believe this is a fair value for the property. Thanks. Bye. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nuwan. Ms. Cates, any questions on the evidence presented by the assessor?
Just one. So with the permit, if I'm reading it right, it has a value of only $24,000.
Yes, yes.
So does that seem significant in context of the size of the property?
No, I just said I just want to add that one to show they are doing a kind of like maintenance. That's all.
Fair enough. That would conclude my new questions for this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. And Mr. Nuwan, we will include for the record your rebuttal evidence to the applicant.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions of the assessor?
No, I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt?
I have none, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nuwan, my only question, I'm just confirming that this subject is located, I guess, in the Riverbend neighborhood and off of North Main. Is that correct? Off of Red River Boulevard, I guess?
Yes, that's
Okay.
right.
So we're up in North Main Street, right in the newer development there? Or newish development, I guess.
Yeah, yeah,
All right.
near to that area.
Okay, thank you. And this is supportive housing. It's owned by CMHC, or pardon me,
The Manitoba Housing.
Manitoba Housing, pardon me. Yes, okay. That's my only question. Okay. Ms. Cates, bear with me one second here. 7 Riverstone Road, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. So if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment of $4,080,000. On page 6, we have our aerial map and Google Map view. And then on page 7, we have some exterior photographs from different angles. And on page 8, kind of a zoomed in overview of the size of the property. On page 9, we have our property description. So the subject property is on Riverstone Road to the west of Main Street, near its intersection with Red River Boulevard West. It is in Riverbend. The property is two-story row house buildings built in the late 80s. The size of the site is approximately 2.4 acres. There are 40 units with 18 3-bedrooms, and there are 40 outdoor parking stalls noted. This property is again social housing as compared to the prior property, which was a market apartment. So if you go to page 14, we have the overview of our income approach. The NOI is not in contention. If you turn to page 19, we have the overview of our cap rate approach. We are disputing a cap rate of 4.95%. We are using a cap rate of 6%, very consistent with our approach for the prior properties. This is a large row house development. It is social housing. And we're assuming that the condition is somewhere on the scale of average. So we're doing a modest adjustment of 0.5% to our base for a rate of 6%. you could see how that fits in to the overall valuation on page 21. So with the NOI of $244,800 and a 6% cap rate, we have a rounded value of $4,080,000. And the appendix starts on page 23, has the city valuation and other documents. And that would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen, any questions of the applicant?
No question.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant?
No, no questions for me, thank you.
Mr. Merritt?
I have none, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Ms. Cates, do you have any pictures of the interior at all?
I don't have interior photos for this property.
Any knowledge of the condition? On the-
For the purpose of the valuation today, I'm just assuming that it's somewhere on the scale of average. Without having done an interior inspection, I can't say with certainty the condition of the interiors. So I'm not using that as a factor for any type of adjustment.
Okay, okay. Thank you for that. Mr. Nguyen, any requirement for summary on this one?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cates?
Given that this is the last social housing property on the docket, I'll just echo my previous comments for social housing. It is a distinct asset class. We need to value it as such. And that the main point of that is in terms of the cap rate. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cates. That concludes 7 Riverstone Road. Mr. Merritt, we're getting into danger zone here for parking.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind, we'll maybe take maybe a 10-minute break. And I'll-
Okay, yeah, because the next 2 items
Yes,
on them, so I think we better let you go. Is 10 minutes enough?
okay.
Maybe 15, 10, 15?
10 should be good.
Okay. We'll take a recess for 10 minutes. I will now call the hearing back to order. Next item on the docket is item number 7, file number 24-1480. Address is 14 Albino Way, I believe. Roll number 14-09790 1900. We do have a preliminary issue regarding a submission by the applicant. That I was notified that documents were submitted late to the after the filing deadline. Ms. Cates, any comments on that?
So just to clarify, my brief and the cap rate study were submitted on time. I did submit some interior photographs last night. So the interior photographs are late, but everything else was on time. And just some context for that. When we do go to people's units, their homes that are, like, we didn't really get to see vacated units. So there are some logistical issues, whether with, are we able to publish those photos as part of the public record? I wanted to make sure all the checks were in place there. So I'll leave the rest to the board's discretion as to whether they want to view them. I'm okay either way, but I just wanted to provide them.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nguyen, any comments on the late submission by the applicant?
No, it can go either way, so.
Mr. Nguyen, sorry, Mr. Merritt. Mr. Nguyen, I think you're muted, possibly.
No. Late submission means normally we can submit any evidence after the due date deadline, right? So if I'm okay with to go with the legislation.
So you are, just to clarify, you are objecting to this late submission?
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, okay. Both parties have given us the information regarding the late submission. Mr. Mohan, we're gonna recess and discuss this in camera, please. Thank you, Mr. Mohan. I'll call now the hearing. I will now call the hearing back to order. The members of the panel have discussed the issue of late submission of information, and it is our opinion that the submission be denied. And we're going to respect the rules of the Board of Revision requiring submission dates. So, Ms. Cates, we would ask you not to present that information, and we will also remove it from our information in our briefs that we have.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Mr. Nguyen, 104 Albina Way, when you are ready, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. File number 241480, roll number 14097901900, 104 Albina Way, roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023, assess value 3,935,000. We have 3 buildings on site, 2-story buildings. Actual build year 1977, effective build year 1977. Number of suite 24. You can see the location of the property. It's actually a nicer nicer location. And you can see the aerial picture of the property. You can see in page 3, you can see request for income information and sales history of the subject property. We have one sales on, we have one old sale. Page 4, income value summary. We have 24 2-bedrooms in that row house. Average monthly rent for unit 1,257. This is this is normal normal row house, not CMH, Manitoba housing or any social housing unit. Classification 20T, gross potential rent 362,111, vacancy rate 0.3, 3%, and effective gross income comes at 351,248. Expense ratio 45.66, 45.66%, and net operating income comes at 190,868. We have used 4.85 capitalization rate, and if estimated market value comes at 3,935,000. Market value per suite 163,958. Page 5, you can see the rent comparables. Page 6, capitalization rates, and page 7, capitalization rate evidence. The 727 Sargent Avenue, the capitalization rate should be 3.45, and please ignore 203 Woodland Street. Page 8 to 9, Municipal Assessment Act assert. Page 11 to 14, you can see the picture of the building. Actually, I took from from their website. I didn't inspect this property. It appears in good quality. Page 15, you can see income and expense information. Actually, their net operating income support our net operating income, the model generated net operating income. And page 17 and 18 also, the 18 to 19, the income and expense information. I think 3,935,000 would be the fair value for this property. This is my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Cates, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions?
Just one, I'm looking at the maps and it's not really clear to me. Is this area the Maples?
Yeah, this is
I couldn't find a cross street on either one of your maps that would help me identify the
the area.
location.
Yeah, this is near to Maple. I'm a little bit lost. Yeah, I'll double check it quickly. See. Yeah, that's near to Maple, I guess. Is here. Yeah, that's a north side of the city, right? Yeah.
North side of Inkster?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, beautiful. That's it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen, I'm looking at page 18, the income and expense statement.
Mhm.
That's, am I right to say that the net operating income declared on the subject property is 191,014?
Give me 1 second. 191. Yeah, that's right.
Less some debt there, or I guess that balance, but about 190,500. Okay, thank you. And location, we are north of Inkster Boulevard, kind of off of
Yeah.
Keewatin, kind of up there, or
yeah, Insta near to the Insta Boulevard, Keewatin, Insta.
okay.
Yeah, between that stretch.
Okay, perfect. And from your subject site map, we are located, it's backing, or pardon me, there's the lake or a retention pond at the rear of the subject property?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. Okay. That is all my questions. Thank you. And Mr. Nguyen, we will register your document of rebuttal for the applicant's information, right? Okay,
Yes, please.
thank you. Okay. Ms. Cates, bear with me 1 second. 104. Aldina Way, please, when you are ready.
Okay, so if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment of $3,599,000. On page 6, we have our aerial view as well as a Google map view. And then I've included on page 7, some exterior photographs from the front and then from the back on starting on page 9. On page 11, we have our property description. So the subject property is located on Albina Way, north of its intersection with Burroughs Avenue in the Tyndall Park area. The property consists of 3 two-story row house buildings that were built in 1977. But I would suggest that the more accurate way to look at this property is as if it were almost 24 individual houses or 12 side-by-sides. This isn't a typical row house, and you can probably gauge that from the photos of the features. So this type of property requires an extremely high degree of repair and maintenance to maintain it. The property is not only wood frame, but each suite contains individual shingle roofs, wooden decks and stairs toward the rear of the property, as well as individual garages and driveways, which is not typical of row house properties. Additionally, each suite has their own hot water tank, furnace, and laundry. So you can imagine the amount of maintenance that has to go into all of these units. So this property operates as a complex with the next property on the docket, 10 Albina. So their statements are combined, but they do portion them out for their I&E submissions. So if you turn to page 16, we have the overview of our income approach. Our net operating income is higher than the cities, and we've deferred to our own stabilized at $215,945. We are disputing the cap rate of 4.85%. We are using a cap rate of 6% based on the fact that it is wood frame, multiple buildings. It is a large scope. There's a lot to maintain here. That's not encapsulated in the expense ratio. And that's the basis of our adjustment to the cap rate. 6% is pretty standard for a row house property. And in the city's own assessments, a couple cycles ago, they would put a minimum 6% for all row house properties in the city. If you turn to page 18, we have our income and expense breakdown. So you can see we've stabilized based on the actuals. In the case of this property, much of the miscellaneous income they reported is for tenant damages, which we wouldn't typically consider to be a form of income. So I have not included miscellaneous income. You'll see our repair and maintenance is high, $4,500 a suite, and that is a cap value. So if you turn to page 19, you'll see how much they actually have to spend on this property to keep it functional, and those amounts are consistent. So one thing I'd like to mention for this property is that typically when you're looking at things that you would consider capital expenditures, such as roof or hot water tank, that's because those items in a typical apartment, you'd replace them once and you wouldn't have to replace them again for 20 years. But at this property, even if you replace 5 roofs, you still have another 20 units to replace those roofs. Same with hot water tanks, laundry equipment, everything. A lot of wooden elements of this property. So it does require a high degree, and you could see that unstabilized, it's actually, they're spending pretty close to $6,000 a suite to get these higher rents. So I would suggest that what we've done for the NOI is reasonable for this property, but considering how much they have to spend that we're not able to capture, just due to being prudent as we can, we are going to reflect that extra amount in the cap rate. So that's the basis for our value of $3,599,000 rounded for this property. The appendix starts on page 21, and I've included the city valuation as well as the financials that we've referenced in terms of our stabilization. And that would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Newon, any questions of the applicant's evidence?
Actually, I'm not sure this is a question. So like if we apply our cap rate to their net operating income, the value would be higher than.
Mr. Newon, we'll leave that as a summary, okay?
Okay, sure.
Thank you. Any other questions of the evidence presented? Mr. Nguyen?
No question. Thanks.
Mr. Merritt, any questions of the applicant?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I have no questions either. Mr. Nguyen, your turn. Any requirement for summary?
Yes, please. So basically, if we use their net operating income and our cap rates, the value will be higher than the right now. So basically, what I'm seeing here, we captured what she's saying using a lower income and low NOI. So that means we capture what she's mentioning there. That's all. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Cates, any requirement for summary?
All I would suggest is that the stabilized actuals with our cap rate makes sense. Typically, if you have a higher income stream, cap rate will follow. And with that assessor's line, I mean, I could kind of say the same thing. I could use his NOI and our cap rate. So I don't really think that's a valid line of argument. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes item number 7, 104 Albina Way. Last item on the docket, item number 8, file number 24-1479, roll of 140979 1400 10 Albina Way. It's a 2025 realty appeal. Mr. Nguyen, when you are ready, please.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, in regards to procedure, technically, we are supposed to address late evidence one more time.
I'm sorry, you're right. Thank you. Thanks, Zach. Long day. Right, so we have the submission by the excuse me, the late submission by the applicant. Ms. Cates, any information you'd like to share regarding that?
No, I'm fine, just following the same as the previous property.
Do you agree to withdraw the pictures submitted late? Or would you rather a decision?
Yeah, maybe, I don't know if I want to withdraw them.
Okay, fair enough. You're right. I'm sorry to put you in that position. Mr. Nguyen, any comment again on the late submission of the information?
I think we can submit anything after deadline. So I don't want to submit that one. So that means you object.
You object to the late submission. Okay, thank you. Okay, we are gonna, Mr. Mohan, please put us in camera and remove the applicant and the assessor, and the panel will discuss the situation. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mohan. The panel has discussed the late submission by the applicant, and we are going to follow the rules of the Board of Revision and not allow the late submission of the information. So the photos of the interior are to be excluded from our decision. And Ms. Cates, please do not mention them in your presentation. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Nguyen, when you are ready, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. File number 241479, roll number 1097091400, 10 Alvina Way, roll year 2025, reference date April 1st, 2023, assessed value 4,819,000, number of buildings 4, actual build year 1977, effective build year 1977, number of suite 30. Page 2, you can see aerial picture of the property and the location of the property. Number 3, request for income information. And also you can see a subject sales history of the property and one sales there. And page 4, income value summary. In this property, we have 14 2-bedrooms, 16 3-bedrooms. In total, we have 30 units. Average monthly rent for unit 1,302. Gross potential rents come at 469,044. Vacancy rate 3%. Effective gross income 454,973. Expense ratio 47.56. Net operating income comes at 238,542. We have used 4.95 capitalization rate, and estimated market value comes at 4,819,000. Market value per suite 160,633. Page 5, you can see the rent comparable. And page 6, capitalization rate, and page 7, capitalization rate evidence. As I said, 727 Sargent Avenue, the capitalization rate should be 3.45. Also 203 Woodlawn Avenue, please ignore that sale. Page 8, Municipal Assessment Act excerpt, and page 9, you can see the income and expense information. Their net operating income supported our model generated NOI. So page 10, 11, and 12, 13, all about income information, income and expense information. Page 14 to 19, you can see exterior and interior picture of the building, those from their website. The assessed value 4,819,000 is fair value. I believe fair value for this property. This is end of my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Cates, any questions on the evidence presented by the assessor?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nguyen, I'm looking at the income and expense statement submitted on page 12. Am I right to say the actual submitted is for the NOI, net operating income, is $238,000 approximately?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, thank you very much. And this 10 Albina Way is also with a retention pond at the rear?
Yeah, it's a adjacent property.
Yeah, but continuing along that Albina Way. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Questions, thank you. Okay, Miss Cates, when you are ready, please, 10 Albina Way.
Okay, if you turn to page 2, we have our requested assessment of $4,499,000. I'll skip through to the property description on page 11. So much of the property description is the same. I did go to visit this property and saw a sampling of units. with the building or site caretaker. So the conclusions for here are assumed to be the same for 104 Albina because they do operate as one. And what I was advised at the site visit is that about 10% of the units have been, could be considered fully renovated in terms of their condition, and the remainder have some sort of mix of, some are all original and then some are mixed between original and with some upgrades. So I'll move ahead to our income valuation on page 18. So the same logic has been applied as was for 104 Albina. We've stabilized based on the actuals. Our NOI is higher and we've used that. So we have an NOI of $269,933 with a 6% cap rate. We have a value of $4,499,000 rounded. Repair and maintenance on page 19. And then the appendix starts on page 21 with the city valuation and the financials for the property. Yeah, and that would conclude my presentation on this property. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. Mr. Nguyen, any questions of the applicant's evidence?
No question.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions?
Do you have a better understanding of the level of renovations done? You said that there was 10% fully renovated and then some in the original condition and some in partially renovated condition. Can you give me even some ballpark percentages there?
Yeah, so the best I could do, and those figures would be across the entire property. So for 10 and for 104. So yeah, they did advise that 10% would be considered like most major things upgraded, like counters, flooring, stuff like that. Of the 5 or 6 units that we went to, most of them were completely original, but there are some where they might have to replace flooring in one unit, but maybe they could leave cabinets or something like that. Sometimes they have to replace a bathtub in between. So I don't have any additional figures of how many are completely original, how many are kind of a hybrid, and then I mean, we do have for the fully renovated, but yeah, that in between amount, I can't provide any further clarification. When property owners and managers do only partial renovations, it's not necessarily something that they track, so they don't necessarily have those figures ready to go. They tend to just track what has had some sort of renovation. If that kind of adds some further clarity, I hope it does, but.
It does. Thank you very much. And that's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I have no questions either. Mr. Nguyen, requirement for summary?
Yes, please. So basically, our assessment that supported by their NOI, and also if we compare to the applicant NOI, and if we use our cap rate, the assessed value should be go up. So that's all my summarization. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Ms. Cates, any requirement for summary, please?
I'll keep it brief. I would just ask that for this property and the remaining properties, you consider our stabilizations and our full cap rate study in terms of our evidence. The city has provided no cap rate calculations in their direct evidence, and some are now even being withdrawn or changed. So I would suggest that, or I would ask that you weight our evidence higher as it is supported and we're being fully transparent about where we're getting all of our numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cates. We have heard all the items scheduled and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you to both parties for appearing, and you'll hear from us as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Goodbye.